morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Just put down the...
Thank you, DJ Leo, for your entertaining before the seminar. How's going, everybody? Is everybody all right? Did you make through half of the week of Tales of the Cocktail? Is everybody awake? Did you have an espresso before to coming in? Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question again. Okay, how are you today, guys? Good. No, we have a seminar next door, so we want to make sure they're going to hear us, okay? Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you all to be here, 10:30 in the morning. I know it's not easy during Tales. Wake up early in the morning. Everybody happy and spritzing, I hope. So we're going to create a new verb today. Like we got more people coming in. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we're going to kick off the seminar. Most of all, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors. Starting, if I can ask everybody for a round of applause to Campari America, Select Aperitivo, and Italicus. You know, brands and sponsors are always going to help us to support and to spread the love for the aperitif culture. And moreover, I want to present this spectacular panel that we have here today. Let's start with those beautiful ladies we have here with us. My beautiful partner in crime and co-moderator and ideator of this beautiful seminar, which is Anna-Louise Marquis from Campari America. A lady that she made the Spritz cocktail a way of life and spreading around America for us is a beautiful Talia Baiocchi.
Oh, okay.
They're going down.
All right.
They're going
Okay.
down.
Okay. Let's make sure they're going to hear us now, okay? Is one of the most amazing beverage director in the industry. He's running one of the most magnificent cocktail bar in the world.
I pay him.
But moreover, is one of the most good-looking person in the whole industry. The super sexy Mr. Leo Robitschek. No, they're just watching a baseball game there, you know. And last but not least, my dear friend, a Venetian-born bartenders, Amaro Montenegro ambassador, a select aperitivo expert, Mr. Rudi Carraro, all the way down from it.
We won.
3-0, go home. And just a quick word about myself. I just consider myself a truly passionate Italian drinker, okay? My name is Giuseppe Gallo.
Also very handsome.
Never like you, Lee. All right, guys. This is the agenda for today. We're going to try to cover different topics, and I'm sure that all of you are here to learn a little bit more about the Spritz, where it's coming from, where the name is coming from, all the different variations about the Spritz, the history, the way how to make it, and moreover, the low ABV cocktail and aperitif culture. You know, everybody's talking about Aperitivo in the last few years, about what Aperitivo exactly is, and where the Spritz, the name is coming from. So we'll try to cover a lot today. Yesterday we had a pre-meeting, and I said the big challenge today for us will be to try to keep on time. You know, as Italians, we love to be late, and we love to go over time. But we have so much expertise and know-how in this panel today that we will try to explain as much as we can. But we want this seminar to be most of all fun, engaging. So I want you to ask questions. If something is not clear because of my funny Italian accent, please raise your hands. I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask Leo to translate in Spanish, okay?
Perfecto.
Does it make sense? Cool. So, Spritz. like, we have some nice gift we're gonna give away today. So I'm gonna ask some questions. Is somebody gonna get the right answer? We're gonna give those beautiful gifts away, okay? So first and most of all, what is a spritz? What is it defined as a spritz cocktail? And where the name spritz is coming from? Do you have the right answer? Who got an answer? Do you have an idea?
There's a lot of answers. There's options. You can say some things.
Low alcohol fizzy. Bubbles. Prosecco or club soda. Right. What else? Aperol. What's that? Garnished fruit olive. Okay. What else? Delicious.
You win.
What about
Maybe.
yeah? What about more than just the drink? What else is spritz?
Kind of a culture, like a
A culture.
We get in there. We get in there.
piece into your night, you know, something that you
Or a breakfast drink.
Good day drinking. Low ABV bitter. It's a bitter drink. And where is coming from?
Spritz.
Italy. It's Italian, guys. Do I need to explain that? Come on. Okay. So, like, it's a way of life, okay? It's a culture. It's not just a simple drink. It's a way how to experience a social moment with your friends. That's the spritz. And we're going to cover this one a little bit more in the next few slides. So the first cocktail that actually you got as a welcome drink today is the Venetian Spritzer. It's a traditional spritzer from Venezia, and it's made with select Aperitivo, Martini Rossi Prosecco, splash of soda, ice, and olive as a garnish. Okay, I guess everybody got a cocktail? All right, can I ask everybody to raise your glass?
Oh shit.
Let's make sure they can hear us next
You
door.
already
Tails
drank
crew?
them, didn't you? Already had it. Take a little
Can we,
Andrea.
can we say
Andrea.
cheers in Italian? Like,
Cheers in a time.
Spritz.
it's a salute, okay? So we say 3, 2, 1, salute!
No, okay.
Now we talk. Okay,
Rudy's thirsty.
let's start with the first one. Rudi,
Yes.
regarding the spritz, where the spritz is coming from? Which city, which area, where in Italy the spritz is coming from?
So, easy to guess. How many of you have been to Venice? Fantastic, a lot of you. So, I'm sure if you were in Venice, you definitely had a spritz. Venice is in the northeast part of the beautiful peninsula of Italy, okay? Beautiful harbor, beautiful port, and full of life. So imagine that you are there, you sip a beautiful spritz with the view of San Marco Square or the gondola, and it's basically a lifestyle. You cannot leave Venice without trying the spritz with friends, and then we're going to see as well what the real meaning of the aperitivo is.
And because when you drink a spritz, also is a memory that you're gonna bring back to Italy, to the gondola, to Venice. That's why it's a way of life. But that's what probably like everybody knows. We all know that spritz is coming from Venezia, from Venice. It's a bubbly cocktail, it's a bit bitter, it's an aperitif, and it's Italian. But we've done a little bit of research on the last 6 months with Anne, Rudi, Leo, and Talia, and actually we find out that we have some history behind the spritz, that it goes back to the Greek and Romans. Greek and Romans. Greek, they were the intelligent one. Romans, they were the powerful one. Okay? So let's start with the Greek. Let's start with the Greeks. What the Greeks, they find out? They find out that actually they could extract bitter component, bitter flavor, with the wine. And this one, it was Plinius and Hippocrates. They're starting to infuse herbs like Artemisia absinthium or dittany to get this like kind of bitter wine. But then, Rudi?
Then we need to thank the Romans actually, because they spread the culture of the drinking of, as it was called, if I'm not wrong, Giuseppe, Vinum absinthium.
Vinum absinthium. It means wine infused with wormwood.
Because we need to figure out that, we need to think that it was a drink as a medicine, so as a remedy for the stomach diseases. Because as me Giuseppe gonna explain you better, the Romans had a very strange way of eating.
Have you ever seen a movie about Romans? The Gladiator, okay? I give you an example, right? Like you all been watching the Gladiator, okay? Like what the Romans they used to do. 80% of the time they used to have wars, fights all around Europe. So you can see the picture there, like they were going from like the Atlantic coast of Portugal all the way to the Black Sea in Russia. That one, it was the Roman Empire, like the whole Europe basically. They were just like conquering whole the Europe, doing wars and fighting. 20% of the time they're going back to Rome, and what they do? They lie down, they discuss politics, but what they do as predecessors of Italians? They eat.
Party.
The party, yes. Like they just used to eat so much, the Romans, and they used to eat in very weird position, in a horizontal position, right? And they found out they had some problem to digest. So in order to find a solution to that, they find this recipe from Greeks, from Plinius and Hippocrates, that actually this bitter wine, it will help them to digest. So they were eating a lot, and they were drinking this bitter wine called Vinium Absinthium. Now, why when you eat in horizontal position, like your digestion is a little bit slower? Did it ever happen to you guys? That maybe like you had a big Saturday night, it's a Sunday, it's a lazy Sunday, you just want to watch a little bit of TV, so you order your deli pizza, you have a couple of slices, you lie down on your sofa, and you feel so full after a couple of slices of pizza? Why? Because of the gravity force. If we eat in horizontal position, the digestion is much lower. If we do in vertical position, it's going to be much quicker. Romans didn't know that. The only solution they could find is to drink some bitter wine with a splash of water. And that is the ancient way how to have a spritz. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. All clear? Any question? Good? Next one. Let's move now a few hundred years later. I'm not sure how many people they know that, but Italy is a country, a unified country as we know today, since the 1861. US is a much longer country than us. Italy, if you see the picture on the left-hand side, it was just a peninsula, a state like, with full of like a small states. South it was belonged to Spanish, the center to the Pope, and then it was Tuscany, and then it was the King of Savoy to France, and then it was the part of that you can see there on the yellow. Which one is that region in Italy, Rudi?
It's basically the Venetian region, Veneto, the Venice region.
And
that's what it's called, yeah, nowadays, okay?
And that one, it was basically controlled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austro-Hungarian, it was the German Empire, basically, to give you like, the full picture. And that's where the name is coming from. How the name is coming from? The German words. Which German words? Basically, like the Germans, they used to go to Italy, to the Venetian region, where they find is like a delicious white wine, which was a high strength on ABV, we're speaking about 18, 19 alcohol by volume wine. So they go into Venice, and they're asking that the white wine to have with like, a spritzen of water. Spritz with the EN at the end, with a splash of water. The word spritz is coming from the German word of spritzen. And then it's been adapted by Italian, and that's how we get the spritz as we know today. Any question? This is really important because it's actually related to the political and cultural situation in Italy back to 150 years ago. Okay? All good? But what are the 3 key ingredients to make a spritz? Who got the answer?
Go for it.
Read it.
Bitter wine bubbles.
Yeah.
And that was easy.
You and a spritz.
Bubbles, wine, and bitter. Okay, the 3 key ingredients to make a wonderful, delicious spritz. Where shall we start? Shall we start with the bubbles, the water, okay? Like, Rudi, where are we here?
This is a beautiful picture of bath in UK. Why I wanted to share this beautiful bath, Roman bath, with you? Because since ever, the water was a very important element in everyday life, especially for the Romans. They used to go to the Romans baths, you may know, to just relax, chill out, and refresh themselves. And we basically take this culture and take it into the spritz culture as well, where the spritz has an ingredient very important, that is the water. And the water also help us to chill out and relax the spritz itself. So make it easier to drink for everybody.
I think it's also good to mention, so there's this culture, this ancient Roman and Greek time where they're adding a little water to their wine to make the wine better, but they're also adding wine to their water to make the water better. So water was not safe, water was a luxury, clean water was hard to get. So there's this symbiotic relationship between the two and the need for the two, and that's how the culture grows out of it, is it was a necessity. If you read Shakespearean plays, if anyone's an actor, because there's bartenders in here, I'm sure you have some experience. Everyone in Shakespearean plays are drunk because they're drinking ale, because you couldn't drink water, you had to mix it with booze. And so the Italian culture was to mix it with wine. So I think it's a fun and interesting story about how they grew together.
And also, like, you know, water has been always like a key element of the life since the human has been created. But what is the game changer for us? Rudi?
The carbonated water, or as we call it nowadays, soda. So yes, the spritz was born just as a splash of water into a too high ABV wine, because for the German Empire troop, when they went down to the Venice region, they used to order a white wine, a glass of wine, but for them it was too strong, it was too high in ABV. That's why they used to add this splash, spritz of water inside. And the moment that the carbonated soda became available all over, let's say, Europe at the beginning, because it's been developed by Mr. Schwepp, it's been the first game changer into the spritz recipe. So imagine like having bubbles into your glass. I mean, it was, wow, what's going on here? At that time was a really, really step up for the drink itself.
You know, today it's very common to go to the little coffee shop or to your local shop, you got some just soda water. Thinking about 300 years ago, like to go from still water with the bubbles in the water, we're just adding some CO2. Like it was completely game changer. And what it really makes, like, you know, so popular as it is, soda water, it was what today we're calling POS, correct?
The POS, yeah.
POS, point of sale. No, like, you know, but basically the soda siphon. Like, you know, do you remember like those beautiful, like, you know, 1930s, 1940s movie where, like, you know, get like this little bartender coming there and add a little bit of splash of water in your little aperitif? Like, this beautiful soda siphon, like in a glass made it, like a beautiful deco, like you're making some soda water. So he made like this carbonated water so popular. And this one is one of the first key ingredients to make a wonderful spritz. Now, what is also so important to make a great spritz? The bitter, okay? Now, regarding the word bitter, I just like, you know, I want to have like, you know, 1 minute on the word bitter, because it has a very different meaning sometimes between Italian and when you translate in English. In Italian, basically, bitter means amaro. But if we say amaro in English, it means digestive. So we basically lost in translation. Like, you know, so bitter is any kind of liqueur or liquid which has this kind of like, you know, bitter aftertaste. And why it's so important for an aperitif? The bitter flavor, they stimulate our papilla here at the end of the mouth, of the tongue, so it's going to stimulate the salivation. When we stimulate the salivation, it's going to open up the stomach, it's going to set the stomach, get ready for your meal. And that's why if you think about the traditional Italian Aperitivo cocktail, think about the Negroni, or the Spritz, or the Americano, or the Milano Torino, or the Sbagliaro. They all have a bitter component. Why? What's the reason? Because they need to stimulate the meal. I mean, you know, like Italians, what they like to do. They like to eat. If you come into my house, my mom, we're having a dinner, what are we going to eat tomorrow for lunch? You wake up for breakfast, what are we going to eat tonight for dinner? It's just Italians just spending the whole day to talking about what we're going to eat. Like, so when you eat so much, obviously, like, you try to find an alternative how to set your stomach before the meal and after the meal. And that's probably has been like a challenge for all our history in Italy. Like, you know, but also, like, it's very important, like, you know, why Italian, they drink so much bitter. And yesterday, speaking to Talia, she had a very nice info about, like, the coffee culture in Italy. Do you want to tell us a little
absolutely.
bit more?
I mean, in Italy, when you're a child, you start to drink coffee much earlier than you would here in the States. I mean, I don't know if you guys started drinking coffee at 4 years old, but it's not typical in America. But bitter flavor is introduced to the Italian palate far earlier, and this is something that is not a foreign flavor for us. This notion of bitter in the United States is really fairly new. And that really is we have food to thank for that. I think we've seen a tremendous evolution of the way that we eat. An introduction of things like radicchio and arugula in place of iceberg. So it's a slow evolution here in America, but in Italy, bitter is not a polarizing flavor, even though, of course, the flavor of bitter typically is a sign of being poisoned. But it's also the antidote, and I think that's what's so amazing about bitter in Italy, and about bitter in being added to the spritz, which really at the time, in the 1920s and 1930s, is a powerful statement of identity. It's essentially taking the spritz back from the Habsburgs and making it Italian. So I think that is, the most important thing. It's a statement of identity, and cocktails in Italy really, during this time, are really about sort of claiming this pastime as something that is Italian and not American.
And what about the history of spritz in America? Because obviously we've been covering like the Italian, the European side of the spritz, but how the spritz has been perceived, has been served in America in the last 40, 50 years. Yesterday we were discussing with Talia, probably the spritz is the modern cocktail version that came up from Italy after this Sbagliato in 1970s. So probably like the best creation we have from Italy on the last 30 years. Hold on. Like, how has been the history of the spritz in America?
Well, it was essentially born as kind of like a half-hearted diet fad in the 1980s. So I think a lot of us, when we think of the spritz, we think of the white wine spritzer. And that really grew up as essentially a way to cut down on your calorie intake and lengthen wine. But, obviously in Italy, it's something completely different. So the spritz that grows up in America in the 80s really doesn't have the kind of attendant culture that goes along with it, which is so important. In Italy, it is linked to a time of day, and that's when you're leaving work and you're going to socialize and before dinner. And that might seem like a, not all that important. It's, an hour of socializing, but in Italy, there's such a dedication to leisure. It's so important to Italian identity. And so the spritz really becomes something that's culturally important in Italy. And in America, unfortunately, we never really sort of got that part, but I think we're getting there. We're trying.
We're working on it.
Yep, we're trying to just get some chips and olives when we get a spritz. Like, I'm just looking for some chips with my drink. That's all I want. It's gonna happen. Please just give me some chips with my drink.
Talia, we're going to move on to sort of the spritz moving into the 20s and 30s. I know that you just did so much research on the spritz. I want to make sure that we get all of your brain because we brought you down here and we want it. Do you have any pieces of that ancient history that stood out to you or that were interesting to you in kind of putting together the story of the spritz from ancient times to kind of the birth of it in the 20s?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really, when we set out to write the book, we knew that there was more to the drink than this like delicious thing that you drink, when the sun's going down, but we had no idea that there was really such an important history. For me, more than anything, it was really about understanding cocktails in Italy during the fascist era and how important it was to Italians that cocktails were their own thing, that it wasn't just something where they were riffing on something that was American. And bitters are a huge part of that. And for me, like another important thing was seeing how this flavor, these liqueurs go from being about medicine to being about statements about leisure, about their aspirational products, which we're going to get into a little bit later when we talk about the art of the time and this incredible synergy between these brands and the artists of their day and how essentially they make these brands. These brands are iconic for a reason, and we have a lot of futurist artists to thank for that.
Awesome. I think we're actually going to move right into that.
Yeah, we're already into it.
Oh, whoops, sorry, I'm skipping ahead.
No, that was perfect. That was a perfect ramp intro into that.
I like to say, also, when, in Italy, basically, for Italians, it takes around 50 to 60 years to come up with a decent cocktail, right? That we can spread around the world, so.
But then you nail it.
Yeah, it might take a little bit longer, it's a half century, think about, the Negroni, it was 1920s. And then the Sbagliato came. It was 1970s, and then the spritz came. It was 2000. So it takes time, for Italians to come up with a proper cocktail. But when I think when we do it, it takes time. But we're trying to do with a little bit of style, with some kind of art, and culture attached to it. And that's why, like, we got these slides with some of the most iconic brands and names that are actually coming from Italy. And as you can see, even like the artwork around that, like, is so iconic. Like, today we all love to have, like, a frame or to have a shirt with those kind of, like, picture. So I'd love to, like, to touch base with those brands a little bit more. Some of them a little bit, they're more established. Some other of them, they're like a little bit less established, or even not export outside of Italy. So, like, I want to touch base on that. But before than that, we have the second cocktail going around. Like, from the garnish and the glass and the color, I can guess what it is, but we'll ask Anne to get the right recipe.
You guys know what this is?
Never had one of these
Never
before.
had one in your life.
No.
This is the Aperol Spritz. This is the classic Aperol Spritz. Our suggestion is 3-2-1. We try and make it really easy. 3 parts Prosecco, 2 parts Aperol, 1 splash of soda. Generally garnished with an orange peel or orange slice, ideally. Served usually, come by the Campari Villa later, and we'll have one in a wine glass. So usually it's in a big, beautiful wine glass with lots of ice, a really beautiful orange color. We're gonna sip out of these deluxe plastic glasses today. This is our classic Aperol Spritz.
So, salute everybody.
Salute!
Salute.
It's not even 11 o'clock. I had 3 spritzes. It makes me very happy, very bubbling. So let's start with the first brand we have on our slide. Rudi, a little bit more info about Selects, which actually is the bitter that we had, the bitter spritz we had as a welcome drink.
Sure, Select has been one of the first bitter agent that went into the spritz recipe. Is originally from Venice. Actually, the distillery was in the island of Murano. Do you know the fancy glass heart from Murano, Venice? It was the same island where the first distillery was. Very distinctive for its color and in terms of flavor profile, rhubarb and juniper are the main botanicals around the 30s that we have inside. So pretty much, very simple, straightforward.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the history of Aperol bitter?
Yeah, Aperol is, I think it's very low ABV. It's an 11% Aperitivo, so it's very much on the low end. It's created in 1919 by the Barberi brothers. I'm going to get all these, I'm French, I'm going to get all these Italian names wrong, so I apologize. I'm going to have you guys say it for me. In 1919 in Padua. So it's been around, and the Spritz sort of started in the 50s, and it's been gaining steam and gaining steam and gaining steam, and so now it's the #1 drink in Italy, and we're pushing it into the U.S. as well, and it's growing double-digit growth for us in the U.S. It's really, really popular.
Where can we find that beautiful Lambretta Vespa we can see in there? Can we buy one?
Yeah. If I find one, I will let you know.
I mean, seriously, look at those kind of artworks from the 1930s, 1920s in Italy. They're so awesome. You look at it, who doesn't want to be on that Lambretta? Who doesn't want to have that kind of drink? And what about the next brand we have on the right hand side with the soda siphon?
Yeah, definitely one of the most iconic Italian brands in existence. This is Campari, created in 1860s by Mr. Gaspar Campari. All of our products are mysteries. I'm the brand ambassador, and they don't tell me what's in anything. It's very closely guarded, but obviously when you taste it, you're going to know citrus, rhubarb. There's probably some herbs. There's probably some wormwood in there. He created it for his bar, Camparino. Oh, man.
Camparino, yeah.
Camparino. I got it right. Okay, Camparino. I have to do the shoulders check. Camparino. And his Campari soda. So if you guys ever go to Italy and you can get the little mini bottles of Campari soda and then bring them back to me, that would be great. That really launched for that brand and kind of took off and became a global phenomenon. Campari.
And then we have the one on the right-hand side on Cynar. Please,
Cynar is...
can I ask everybody to pronounce Cynar?
Cynar.
Cynar.
Not Cynar.
Not Cynar.
And
No one knows what Cynar is.
if I can, just 5 seconds.
Please.
The name Cynar is coming from the principle active inside the roots of the artichoke plant, which is called Cinarina. It's one word, Cinarina. That's where the name is coming from. So his name is Cynar, not Cynar. Leo, how we call it?
Cynar.
Cynar.
Can we all just, maybe one more time, just really loud so they can hear? 1, 2, 3.
Cynar!
Thank you so much.
I think they got it.
So Cynar is one of my beloved brands in our portfolio. It's created in 1952 by Angelo, did I say Dalle Mole? Is that right?
Yes, bravo.
Yes, okay, bravo. Obviously, I think everyone knows the main ingredient in Cynar.
Thistle.
Yeah, artichokes. So there's artichoke leaves, plus an additional assortment of herbs and spices, 16.5% ABV. Probably the most, for me, of this, like the most unknown as a spritz ingredient, but the Cynar spritz is delicious, and you were telling me yesterday one of the top-selling spritzes in Italy.
Yeah, if you go to Venice, you go one of these traditional bars that we're going to see later on with Rudi, like, you will go there and ask for a spritz, and the bartender would ask you like with select Aperol or Cynar? Like, I personally like the one with Cynar because it's a little bit more bitter. I know that Cynar is considered to be like a digestif or an Amaro outside of Italy. It's like 16.5, correct?
Yeah, we talk about it as Amaro because it's dark brown, but really it works as an Aperitivo, and it's really delicious in a spritz style, kind of long, lengthened drink.
And I don't think that we need to get confused between an aperitif because it's a red color and Amaro because it's a dark color. Like they all kind of bitter liqueur or bitter aperitif. If you know how to mix them, I'm sure you can make a great aperitif, you can make a great classic cocktail, or actually you can make a great digestif. It's just about how you're going to balance, how you're going to mix them in your cocktail. And last but not least, I think it's also very important, the Cappelletti, Talia.
Yeah, so Cappelletti is different because all of these are liqueurs, so they're spirit-based, and Cappelletti is a wine base, and its primary bittering agent is gentian. The style of this aperitivo is called Americano, so these are wine-based aperitifs that are bittered with gentian, and this comes from Brescia. And one of my favorite bitters to use in the spritz. You have flavors of like bitter orange, a little bit of vanilla. It's definitely a tad lighter and lower in alcohol.
Is anybody got questions so far? It was everything clear? Question there.
The Cynar spritz, is it just the same recipe that you use Cynar instead of the alcohol?
Yes, Cynar, Prosecco, and club soda over ice. I would recommend to garnish with a slice of cucumber. It makes nice, fresh, with a beautiful aftertaste.
Or grapefruit.
Again, it's my personal taste.
Yeah. Grapefruit, ginger, really lovely also in a spritz with Cynar.
Question there?
I'm curious, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the Hungarian drink, the Roche or whatever.
Spritz?
Are those related at all? I think it's like FRO.
Frox. Yeah, same thing.
Are they related at all?
I mean, you see the spritz, it's basically all the white spritz, so it's just white wine and soda water, and you see that kind of all over this area that was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so it's called a different name in Croatia, it's called a different name in Hungary, but yeah, it's all part of the same tradition, but again, what makes the spritz Italian is that addition of bitter liqueur.
What are the other names? Can you tell us? Do you know
I forget what the Croatian, it's in my book, I forget what the Croatian one is, but Frox, it's like FRO with an umlaut, like CCS or something.
It's with a CCS, yes.
CCS, yeah.
So one of the things I love about seminars and learning about the history of categories and just is learning all these different, where the history of them and the stories. And so, God, you guys, it can't be that good. They're like playing it up.
It can't.
It can't be that good. But I love the idea of then maybe going and doing some research on Frox and finding history of that and then creating a cocktail based on that and finding the way the wars and migration and history all ties together to create these drinks and these drinking cultures.
And it's also important to note too with all of these brands that there's a lot of regional variation with the spritz, and people kind of think of these bitters as like a football team. Like you identify if you're an Aperol person, like you are an Aperol person and you're diehard, or you're a select person, or if you are from Milan, like there is a real love of Campari there, and you might have a bicicletta, which is still white wine, Campari, and soda water. So even though this drink it doesn't change that much, you do see regional variation in the spritz, which I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. Actually, if you go to northwest of Italy, you find some kind of spritz based on vermouth, which is the region of vermouth. It's absolutely Italy is a country, but it's so regional as well. So as you can find on the culinary culture as well, so you can find different type of food. You go to south of Italy, it's more seafood. You go to north of Italy, it's more meaty. It's exactly the same with the cocktails. You find all this variation, and everybody obviously is very proud of what is coming from their own city. You got a question there?
Primary reasoning for Campari having different ABVs
Yeah, so this has been a discussion that's been coming up a lot recently. It's been around a long time. So as they moved into different markets, they would create the product that was desired by that market. So sometimes it goes up and down. Sometimes it's about taxes. Sometimes it's easier to get, it's maybe less expensive or whatever it is to get the product in at that level. So it's kind of fun. It's like there's different Camparis all around the world that have different ABVs. I know Argentina has the highest. The U.S. is sort of in the middle. So it kind of becomes a fun game of kind of traveling around. When you're in a different country, check out the Campari bottle. The ABV might be different because that was created for the local market. That's really normal for liquor companies. We create a wild turkey that only goes to Japan. We have a lower ABV wild turkey that goes to Australia. So it just sort of depends what they're drinking there, what they want. We're not going to serve them something they don't want. And so that's the explanation behind it.
And I was a little bit surprised about all the discussion that came up recently because it's not the news. It's not just for Campari. I think any liquor company, like even vodkas, like they got different ABV for different country or different continents. So I didn't really understand what was the surprise on that. It's like, that's normal. You want to make a liquid, a brand that is going to be appealing for your consumer target in the country, in the States. You're not going to sell there something that like they don't want it. So I think it has been going on for years.
And also, like Leo just kind of whispered in my ear, like also the EU has a different standard of what qualifies as a liqueur versus what the US qualifies as. So you're also kind of appealing and kind of going with whatever the country or the organization's standards are for those ingredients and those products. So we need to comply.
Question there?
Is Select available in the States?
Select available in the US.
Is Select available in US, Rudi?
Yes, it is, absolutely. We're doing a lot of activation, especially in New York and LA at the moment. And more or less all over the US, you can easily find it around. Yeah.
Yeah, one more question and then we'll keep talking about art. Yeah. We are going to let him talk. For a while, he's just going to look pretty, but we have some...
They only let me talk after you've had at least 2 cocktails.
We'll leave him as the last one, so I can...
I'm way more charming once you're drunk.
Leo's going to host you through a pretty intense low ABV pricing session in a minute.
The boring part?
I think it's actually very exciting. So we're going to get through some of the history, and these are the history experts. But I actually had a question for you, Leo. Is there a spritz culture in South America? You're from, is that something? Because I know we sell a ton of Campari. Yeah.
It's very dependent on what country you're from. So the South, which probably has a lot more Italian influence, like places like Argentina or Uruguay definitely have more of a spritz culture. The places sort of in the middle definitely do not. It's more of a citrus-based or rum culture or sugarcane distillate culture. And then in the North, you see sort of a mix, depending. Like Venezuela has a lot of Italian influence, so in certain regions you see that, but then it's not really as big of a culture. No.
Everybody happy with the nuances?
It's a big place.
Right. But we have been covering now the bitter part. We've been covering the bubbles. We're still missing one ingredient. Which one is the ingredients we're missing? So we done the water, we done the bitter, so we're missing the wine. We're gonna cover later on. But before we're gonna get there, I think it's also important to understand what's the history about the Italian aperitif, the classic cocktails they've been making, Italy, the aperitivo from Italy, famous as it is today. So 3 main cocktails, so you can see on this slide. First one is the Mito, or what in Italy we say Milano Torino. Mito in Italian means myth as well. Why Milano Torino? Milano because the bitter Campari, so the bitter part coming from Milano, M-I, me, and then the vermouth coming from Torino, T-O, so Mito. This one is the first ever aperitif classic cocktail that you can think from Italy. We're talking about here probably mid of the 1800s. Bartenders in Italy back in the days, they didn't really have many ingredients to mix with. So they took the bitter liquid from Milan, they took the vermouth from Turin, they mixed together, straight up, maybe not even chilled, and they made the Milano Torino. It's a delicious cocktail, and I invite everybody to taste it. It's one of my favorite aperitivo overall. Then we see the evolution of the Milano Torino. What happened after the 1900s? We have the American tourists that are starting to come to Italy. They're going around, they try to find a drink, a cocktail, and what they find is this very bitter cocktail called the Milano Torino, and they didn't like it. So they brought with them these great things, which is the club soda. And also, like, they're starting to have ice in Italy as well. So they're starting to add a splash of club soda to the Milano Torino. So Italian bartenders, they started to say, you know what, like the Milano Torino, like the Americano tourist, like the American tourist, and that's how it became the Americano. We are here around late 1800, early 1900. Then after the First World War, so 1919, 1920, we have this very well flamboyant gentleman coming from Firenze. His name was Conte Camillo Negroni. Have you ever heard about the Conte Camillo Negroni? Like, he actually had an experience here in the US for a few years as well, in New York on the far west. And he goes to UK, in England, and he finds these new spirits with the juniper berries, the gin. He actually likes it. Why? Because most of the juniper berry produced for gin, they're coming from Tuscany. Firenze is in Tuscany, so it reminds him his homeland in Firenze. So he basically brings with him in his little luggage a little bottle of gin. He goes back to his favorite bar in Firenze. He asks to the bartender, can you please add a splash of gin to my Americano and just avoid the club soda? And can you change the garnish and put a little bit of orange for me, please? Like, you know, so like, you know, it's very like, you know, demanding customer. Like, and that's like how it became the Americano, like the Conte Negroni, Americano like the Negroni, and that's how we get the name of the Negroni cocktail. One of the top 3 selling cocktail in the world in the last 5 years, the Negroni cocktail.
I'm good.
Are you sure?
It takes 100 years to create a cocktail to Italians, but when we do it well.
When you talk about all 3 drinks, when you're saying remove, you mean the losses, right, predominantly?
Yes, all those classic cocktails, they all based on, like, you know, rosso or sweet vermouth, okay? Like, you know, it's the, let's say, the traditional, probably like the original vermouth coming from Turin, from the Piemonte region, okay? So always sweet or rosso vermouth when we're talking about classic Italian aperitif. Any question? Obviously, we already covered the recipe from the Aperol Spritz, but then, like, you know, more bubbles to the Spritz. So we have been covering like the bitter liqueur, the bitter aperitif with the Select and Aperol and Campari, and then we've been covering like the club soda, where it's coming from. But where the Prosecco is coming from? Do we have a clue where it's coming from, Rudi?
Definitely, yes. I'm a fan of Prosecco, to be honest. It comes from this little hills region called Valdobbiadene, a small city, in the Venice region, again. So they decide to stay local, basically, with the choice of wine that goes into the Spritzer recipe. And the variety of the grapes that makes the Prosecco, that are called Glera, and you can call it Prosecco only if you made it in the hills of Valdobbiadene. It's like more or less you know, champagne, or the Barolo for the red wine, for example. No? It needs to be coming from that particular hills. And nowadays, yes, the production grow and grow and grow, so you can find different varieties of Prosecco, but back in the days, beginning of the 1900s, there was like between 5 and 10 producers of Prosecco, because they were the original owners of the land. Then they started to subletting, and of course the family didn't want to take over the business, so that's how the business started to expand for other people as well.
So all traditional, all locals, bitter aperitif from the Venetian region, like in Prosecco from the Veneto region, and then with a splash of club soda, and we have our spritz. But where the olives is coming from?
Nice story, this one. Do you know where this? Do you know where the olive is coming from?
Who knows where the olives is coming from? Where?
Definitely.
No Spain, no Italy, no Greece. No, I'm saying like the olives as idea to garnish your spritz. No, really. No, not that. It's coming from England.
UK. Yeah.
UK. What they used to do in England?
Basically, in England, they used to, the bartender, because they wanted to make more business for the bar, they used to put a pinch of salt inside the glass before they pour in the pint, okay? The beer on top, okay? So, in this way, yes, you are drinking a lightly refreshing beer, but at the same time, you're getting thirsty because you keep on dehydrating yourself because you're having salt at the same time.
We do not advocate this as a technique to sell more beer or cocktails, just to as just a general liability.
We were speaking of
salt is
over
great.
200 years ago, yeah, like we don't do that today.
Even more, yeah.
We
Didn't
just
salt also-
translated in Italian with an olives. Obviously, the olives, it does have a little bit of saltiness. So like it actually incentivize your drinking because you eat these beautiful olives, this saltiness is stimulate like, you know, your appetite, and then you drink your beautiful, refreshing cocktail.
And also, yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought salt also added to the effervescence. So any beer that was a little bit older, if you put a pinch of salt, it would make it more lively, more sort of fresh for the guest.
And generally, salt makes things taste better too. So we're seeing a lot more saline spray on cocktail bars everywhere. People are using more salt. I'm just saying, don't do it intentionally to get people more drunk. And that's all I'm saying. You can do it if it's like a flavor thing.
I mean, if I can,
Salt is your friend.
Yeah, salt's your friend. I'm not.
In cooking and cocktails, it's good.
if I can add, then the olive was the Italian answer to the this English thing, but at the same time now, where you don't get the olive, you got some salty nuts or some salty crisps, as you were saying before.
Chips.
At
Just
the bar.
advocating for the chips, yeah.
So the moment that you have a salty nuts, you want to drink more. This is the
Yeah.
answer, no?
Yeah.
And regarding the chips, Talia, that's a picture from where?
This is from Venice, so a Baccari in Venice, and you know the olive sort of what's that?
Baccari.
Baccari. Shit. I just have the name, like I'm not.
I had to.
No, it's good. So the olive is a clue. I mean, in Italy, Italians don't drink without eating. And again, going back to the spritz being something that is about a moment. And that moment, of course, because we're in Italy, has to do with food. And so basically this time of day, you leave work before you head home to have dinner or before you head off to a restaurant to have dinner. You stop, you meet your friends at the Baccari.
Correct.
And you have some snacks. And in Venice, those snacks are called cicchetti, and they vary from, good, right? Okay.
Better than mine.
Yeah. So they vary from bar to bar. A lot of the time you're having crostini, you're having, you're having...
piece of octopus, some, cod, like some Venetian cod style on top of the crostini, slice of mortadella or salami on the top of a piece of bread, whatever can stimulate your appetite.
And so this also, the spritz, as you sort of move from the northeast of Italy towards the northwest of Italy, the spritz changes in the types of bitter liqueurs that are included, but also the types of food that you eat during aperitivo also change. So in Venice, I feel like this tradition of going and having a small bite of food is really well preserved, even though that city has become obviously, really well trafficked by tourists. It still is, I think that culture is well preserved. When you move toward Milan, for example, you have basically the aperitivo hour becomes more and more robust and sort of teeters on the edge of being dinner. So they call it apericena there, which is sort of become a derogatory term, and I think that essentially this, aperitivo having this resurgence in Italy, that trend sort of has, jumped the shark in many ways, particularly in Milan and Torino, and I think people are now kind of pulling back, and it is, true aperitivo again, but it's not dinner is basically the point here. Like, you're not supposed to have dinner, you're not supposed to load your plate 4 times during aperitivo hour. It's a snack.
It's not a free buffet.
Yes,
Okay.
it's not a free buffet.
It's what is very interesting about this picture, and again, thank you, Talia, for to open up this point. Can you see the price on those skewers?
Right.
So for €1.80, €1.60 for $2 basically. For $2, you have a screw of calamari, a screw of meatballs, or you can have a screw of olives or spiced chips. So basically, you go there, you order your spritz. Can you see the back bar up there? You got Cynar, Select, Campari, and Aperol. So you choose your bitter, you get your spritz, and then for extra $2, you can get one of these beautiful screw that you can eat there on a piazza, al fresco style with your friends, and enjoy your moment. But from there, we went to what we call more a global lifestyle, and with this aperitivo trend.
Look at those plates. Wow.
and thanks again, for the apericena. Apericena is a new word coming from Italy, which is basically blend aperitivo with a dinner. Dinner is cena in Italian, so apericena. So I think about with this one, it was actually the way. There are 2 reasons why in Italy the cocktail culture was preserved after the 2000. I mean, on the late 1990s, like in Italy was like a country where it was really difficult to find a decent cocktail. Trust me, it's coming from an Italian. Like, you know, it was really tough. Like, you know, you find some like, you know, classic cocktail bar in a 5-star hotel, but then like the rest of street bar, it was really poor in terms of services and offering. Like the two things that saved our cocktail culture, it was the spritz. So this new, refreshing, bubbling cocktail coming like from the Venetian region, and the Apericena. This all what in Italy used to be called happy hour. Happy hour, but different what it's the meaning in English. Happy hour was basically like you go there, you pay 7-8 euro for a cocktail, and think about like this buffet standing there on the right-hand side where you have cold pasta, you got eggs, you got salad, you got chips, you got olives, and you can serve yourself as much as you want.
So it is a free buffet.
It is a buffet, yeah.
Okay,
But-
it is a free buffet.
But it's been a pushback. So on the last few years, like, you know, there are less and less and less accounts and bars in Italy who they do that because basically they find out that there was no profit making that. Yeah, your bar is full, but like you waste all your margin, like, you know, giving free food to people. So like, you know, it's a big pushback now. Still, when you go in Italy, and Talia, maybe you can help me with that, like you still have your little like, you know, olives or crisp to your table because otherwise Italians, they would never have a drink without some food.
Right. Yeah, so the essential is at least the chips, right? The chips and the olives.
So you
The
all are
chips
clear
again.
what Talia wants?
Just chips.
When you see her. I think we definitely have an agenda because we love this style of drinking and we love this culture and we want to bring this culture as much as we can to the US and to wherever else you guys are from. So we're pushing on this because I don't see this kind of drinking in the US the way it's done in Italy, the way it's done in Spain or France. It's like these small bites, these light drinks, this time of day that we don't really have in the US, and I would love to see more of that. I would love to be able to transition from the office to dinner with this space in between.
So I will say
yeah.
there's been a ton of research done on like serving bar snacks, mostly chips. Or nuts. And it really does, even though it costs some money, really does increase revenue because when people start eating a little bit, it not only stimulates appetite, but it makes them stay a little longer, order a second drink, and then if you serve food, possibly order a meal.
Yeah. I also think it's important to note, just on the topic of Aperitivo, that it is something that's democratic. It is cheap. I mean, you can go to Venice and have a bite and a spritz for 3-4 euro. So it is not meant as, it's something that, you know, if you're a university student, if you are somebody who, you know, works in an office, it doesn't matter. The spritz is for everyone. And I think that's a really important thing to note.
So can you imagine how tough it was the job for Talia traveling throughout the Italy, go all this bar, taste all this food, holding all those plates? Like, you know, can you give us a little bit of those, like, you know, awful experiences?
So many pits.
So many
Really dangerous work for you.
But it's so, like, you know, it's so crucial, like, you know, the spritzy became such a global trend that actually, like, you needed the book. And I have to say, like, you know, Talia and Leslie, that are like, you know, a phenomenal job, like to bring basically what we have in Italy, what we're giving as a granted as Italians, like, you know, to America and to around the world. So it was so inspiring to read your book, like to open all this new wave of the spritz and low ABV cocktail, not all in Italy, but outside, all around the world. And now we finally gonna let Leo talk a little bit.
Brace yourself.
And again, like, you know, I don't want to sound too obvious, but I thought that Leo was a genius of the bar. But then when I look at those slides, I said, like, you know what? You're not a genius. Should I call you Einstein?
It's very kind. Well, I would say two things. Talia, you want to say something about the book for a second?
Yeah, we're actually a little out of order. Can I just bring it back? Okay, so these were my slides. So actually, Leo's not gonna. We're gonna wait like 3 minutes and we're gonna talk to. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Do you want to like go stretch or like do it? You can. Okay, we're just gonna talk to Talia for a few minutes. So the way the seminar, the idea was to take the history and the Italian culture and get very, very Italian, and then also now bring it into the U.S. and see how we're gonna adapt, because America's all about innovation, and what we're famous for taking an idea and turning it into something else. So what I was interested in, the reason I really wanted Talia here was because I wanted to talk about the history and where Spritz comes from, but then also what I'm fascinated with and sort of the mission of your book was to show where Spritz has gone and how Spritz came to the US and became this whole new thing. And so I wanted to talk to you. I could talk to you for like 15 hours, but we're going to limit it to a couple of minutes. And if you got the chance to talk to her at some point, and please read this book, it's incredible. You went so in depth and you got so creative with exploring it and really kind of opened up the world of spritz. So I wanted to, first, you said this really great thing about the nature of spritz. You said it to me on the phone about the nature of spritz being to innovate. Can you talk about that a little bit as we move into the U.S. and how spritz kind of translates into the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, sort of like the way that I see spritz is kind of an invitation more than it is sort of a set recipe, right? So in Italy, when we were doing research, we were like, well, why is there no spritz recipe anywhere for us to find? Because anyone who's done cocktail research here in America, like it's all about finding recipes in old books, and that just does not exist in Italy because the spritz really was a ritual. It was more of a way of serving wine than it was a set recipe. And so we sort of took that idea and tried to preserve it in the book. Of course, we have actual recipes, but I see the spritz as more of a template. And I think that the way that we've seen it evolve here in America is very much in that spirit. And so we take this notion of bubbly, bitter, bubbly, and low ABV, and that sort of like stretches on and on endlessly. So you have obviously the wine being important, but then you also have a category we have a section in the book called cousins. So these are drinks that are bubbly and low ABV, but they don't necessarily have a wine base, or they have a sherry base, or they have Lambrusco, or something that kind of takes this idea of the spritz and continues to riff on it. But we always talk about how there's one recipe in the book that I love from Greg Best, where all of the specs for the recipe, it's 2-ish ounces, 1-ish ounce of this and that. And I think, to me, I loved that recipe. Our editor tried to cut that so many times, and we insisted on keeping it in that way, because to me that gets to the heart of what the spritz is, that it's improvisational. So that you can, there's a lot of places you can take it. We've seen with the cocktails that Leo has obviously on his menu. I have to give a lot of credit to Natasha David. This book would not exist without her. She was really one of the first people, at least in New York, to have a spritz section on her menu, and that was when we were sort of like, wow, I think this is more than just a little thing. The other important thing to note is that, one of the things I love about Italy is that people don't have a problem going and drinking literally the same drink every single day at the same time. But in America, that's just not part of our culture, and we constantly want to evolve. We don't want to do the same thing twice. And so I think what we've seen here is that the spritz is constantly in motion in the U.S.
So I pulled a couple examples from your book about drinks that you loved, and kind of tell some of these examples of how things were innovated. Can you do the next slide? Next slide? Oh.
Next slide. Oops.
Oh, next slide. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, guys. I'm really bad at PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So can you talk a little bit about this drink and why you love it? Well, yes.
So basically, I mean, the thing that's great about this is we have Amaro Nardini, which is 100% a digestif. That is not something like Cynar that kind of doubles. It's extremely bitter. Obviously Aperol, lemon juice, the olive brine, so again, going back to adding a little bit of salt to your drink, and Prosecco. So this is something that does stray just a little bit from the formula. It's still giving a nod to the Aperol Spritz, but the flavor profile is completely different. And for me, this is a drink that not only works as an aperitif, but something that can absolutely double as a nightcap.
Ooh, nice. And then this is the next one.
Right, so this is from the guys down at Broken Shaker in Miami, so like adding a little tropical flair into this with the papaya shrub, fresh lemon juice. Oftentimes you see in the US that a lot of bartenders are adding fresh citrus to the spritz formula, which I love. It just gives it that extra lift. And then, of course, rosé. We see a lot of spritzes today that are using a rosé base or using rosé sparkling wine because, we're in the age of rosé.
Hashtag rosé all day.
Rosé all day.
How did you know in the moment when you pitched the book, how did you see it coming? Did you just love spritz? Because you called it.
Honestly, we did not know that it was going to be, that spritz was about to blow up in the way that it has. It's been really remarkable. We saw that we saw the Aperol Spritz sort of popping up here in the US, but it was really more about bartenders actually calling out drinks with this formula that are different than the Aperol Spritz by name. And we kind of took a leap of faith, frankly. We saw it happening. We were like, we have a feeling that this is really, going somewhere. We're going to try to kind of get this to market as soon as we can. So we really wrote the book in like 3 or 4 months.
I know, and at the time, so Talia wrote this book with one of our mutual best friends, and I just thought it was an excuse to go to Italy. I was like, that's not a thing.
That is also part of it. I'm not going to lie. We were like, let's go to Italy for like 2 weeks.
So I want to stay on time, so I'm going to, I just have one more question for you. So as we, as bartenders in the U.S., we start to look at spritz and we start to innovate with a spritz and start to conceptualize. I feel like there's a really good PR opportunity. I feel like spritz is very much having a moment, and I feel like spritz is a really great way for bartenders looking to get their name out there, get drinks featured on things. Do you see that? Is that something that's true?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's all part of this larger trend towards low ABV, and being able to create like really complex, interesting drinks without oftentimes without any strong spirit. So I do think that now we've gotten to the point where like if you're creating a cocktail list, I can't see a menu being fully complete without a section that has low ABV or that has low ABV cocktails sort of integrated into that. And obviously the spritz formula is a perfect place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as a brand, I know we're always looking for innovation with the spritz because it's such a buzzworthy thing right now that we're always looking for that. And it's also like great for day into night. So there's a lot of, especially in the summertime, Leo, you can probably speak to this too. Like, I'm sure a PR company always hitting you up for like, what's your most summer cocktail?
Yeah, I mean, it's always like what's on trend, and what's on trend right now is the low ABV cocktail. So there's always like, hey, do you have anything new and exciting that we could write about? And
so it's a good opportunity. So that's going to transition into some benefits. So for this section, I know it's like very cheesy. So,
Just want to ask, is anybody got any question?
Oh yeah.
All right.
For
Questions for Talia.
It's all good? Everything clear?
We're also going to have quiet time at the end too.
What is like Camparis and all these imperial liqueurs? It's red color. Just old traditional ingredient that they use in infused, or why are most of these red, like so red?
Why are all these products red? Yeah. So there used to be. I mean, I can only speak for Campari and Aperol. You can talk to Select. Do you want to speak about historically? Or Talia, do you have any? Is there like a historical reason they were colored red, or?
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone knows, but I've asked this question a lot of times, and what people did say, that the red color did not come from rhubarb, it actually came from beetles back then. But But when I asked, and most people said, hey, marketing's been around for a long time, and red is a color that people really like.
Right. Yes.
So seeing somebody drink a red cocktail, which there was nothing really that was red at that moment, makes people want to drink more cocktails. So it's like, hey, what is that? I want it. And I mean, you still see it today. Somebody orders an Aperol Spritz, and it was like, ooh, what is that? Can I have one? And you're like, great, yeah, I have 3. But
and to answer your question, so it used to be the beetle, the cochineal. So they don't still use it. They use it for so we don't use that now. It's vegetarian. So we use a coloring. But for one market, for Sweden, we still use the beetle, which I learned yesterday.
And
so they're still available.
Back in the days, if I can,
yeah, go for it,
so I got some old bottles of Campari or Aperitif, like Select. Like back in the days, all those liqueur, all this liquid, they were more like orange-ish. They were not red. Then, as Leo just said, marketing has been around for a long time. So they find out that red is much more engaging color. And also remember that some of those brands have been actually building the whole heritage and the history, the global platform around the red color is much more appealing. Back in the days, you had no color. You had red or brownish. Which one will you choose? So it's all common sense. Let's move to the low ABV cocktail. I just want to touch 30 seconds regarding the cocktail we're drinking now.
Yeah, sure.
So just building on Talia points regarding that, adding a little bit more citrus. The one we have is the last cocktail of the day, which is basically super quick area. Wow.
I got you, Bill.
And it's basically the Italico Spritz is with Italicus, is a new liqueur, it's a Rosolo di Bergamotto. So basically it's made with a bergamot liqueur, aperitif. Rosolo is not of this an ancient traditional category from Italy. We're not going to talk about Rosolo, otherwise it's going to take 3 days to explain everything. It's just like a bergamot, who's not familiar with bergamot, is a citrus coming from, thank you Leo, it's a citrus coming from the south of Italy, and and is the aromatized component for all grey tea. It's a very simple cocktail recipe, one part of bergamot liqueur, one part of prosecco, ice, and one olive. Okay?
Okay. So as we were putting the seminar together, we were talking about these drinks, and so spritz is absolutely a category, but also low ABV cocktails are very on trend right now, and they're very something people are interested in. So I lumped them. Please forgive me. I lumped them together because this conversation is relevant whether you're doing a spritz or just like a low ABV cocktail that's not a spritz. And then so I'm going to have Leo talk about the benefits of them. So we have the history and we have some culture, and now we're going to get into how you use this in your bar and how this is valuable to you as a bartender, as a bar owner, and as a guest. So Leo's going to go through these three benefits to the guest, the bartender, and the bar owner.
Before we do, just two parts. One to compete with the room next door, but also this couldn't happen without these guys in the back, the cocktail apprentices at Tales of the Cocktail. And like I said, they usually don't let me talk unless you've had 2 drinks because I'm way more charming and engaging then, but we're doing low ABV cocktails, so you have to have 3 now. Yeah, so, I mean, thank you so much for the kind introductions, and thank you for saying that I'm a genius, which is completely false. Any success that I've had has mostly been a lot of luck, 2, a lot of hard work, and 3, a lot of mistakes that have actually ended up working out. So when I started at 11 Madison Park in 2005, I had no clue what I was doing, and one thing that I sort of inherited was a liquor room full of a whole bunch of odd shit that nobody ever used. So I actually had a shit ton of sherry. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be cursing.
It's totally fine.
Sorry, if anyone's offended, just please raise your... Okay, perfect. But also a lot of, surprisingly, Amaros and Aperitivos, and back then we had like, I don't know, a whole bunch of things that I had never encountered, and I don't know, the wine director before us was like, I don't know why he purchased all those things, but I was like, all right, well, I need to move this inventory, so what am I going to do? And I started playing with these products, and from that sort of came our low ABV section. And it sort of happened organically, and it ended up happening, pretty well. And then in thinking about it, because I'm very analytical, I'm like, well, what are the benefits? Why am I doing this? And mostly I'm very insecure, so I basically question every single thing I do. I'm like, is this okay? And what ended up happening is there's a lot of reasons why the low ABV, the spritz, or these cocktails are really relevant, but also important. So how many of you actually bartend in a restaurant or bar, own a restaurant or bar, or manage a restaurant or bar? All right, so a lot of you. For those of you that don't, this might be super boring, but you'll find some of the secret insider stuff. And if you run a business, every business wants to do a few things. You want to provide a good service or a good product. You also want to be profitable. And to me, these low ABV cocktails do a few things. One of them, they're interesting, they're delicious, they're fun, they're innovative. So it's easy, especially if you're a bar that doesn't have time to prep a lot of these crazy syrups and infusions, it's easy to use one of these products and get a super interesting cocktail. A lot of these products, if you ever talk to Joaquin Simo and you hear about his Mr. Potato Head method of creating cocktails, if you have a straight spirit, let's say that's like the nose, and then you add either citrus or sugar or whatever. So it could be the ear, the eyes, the mouth. But with these cocktails, a lot of them, with these products, a lot of them have bitterness, a lot of them have sugar, a lot of them have acidity. So it's more of like this Darth Vader mask. So you don't need to do a lot in order to make these cocktails super interesting. Because a product on its own is super interesting, and when you start integrating it into a cocktail, it's like, oh, whoa, this tastes a lot better than just a traditional sour. Also, as we said, it stimulates appetite. You're ready for a meal. Like, you're drinking these things and you're like, oh, well, now I want more chips. Or now I had chips and now I'm hungry. I don't know, we're on that side, okay.
Yeah, so it's valuable to the guest.
Yeah, it's valuable to the guest, it's valuable to the restaurant, but it's also, if we all worked in bars and restaurants, you know what happens when people drink drinks. They get a little more drunk. So it's really good for managing the crowds. So depending on where you work, some people might imbibe a little bit more, they might get a little more drunk. This is a way to sort of in a polite way, cut people off or slow people down from drinking. You're like, hey, that person who's drinking martinis, you're like, hey, you like a martini, do you want to try something different? You like vermouth, obviously, or you like gin. How about we try something like a Negroni, which is a little bit lower ABV? Oh, you like a Negroni, how about we try a Milano Torino? Or how about we try an Aperol, I'm sorry, not Aperol Spritz for sure, but an Americano. It's a way to not only engage your guest, but also teach your guest something new, but you're providing better service because you're not like, dude, you're drunk, you need to stop drinking. You're like, hey, how about we explore things? You're great. You're super smart. You're handsome. Like, come on, drink these things. And then the last thing, it's way cheaper. I was just on my phone, not texting, but I was running some numbers. And if you think about an Aperol Spritz, Aperol is like, what, $24 a bottle?
I would never quote pricing.
Well,
that's a distributor joke, sorry. Yeah, $24. That's right.
It's between the teen range and the 20-something range, so which is a lot cheaper than whiskey or gin. Well, it depends on whiskey, or like gin or like some other things. And if you think about it, an Aperol Spritz is usually pretty affordable. And I was just running numbers, and it's like an 11% liquor cost if you sell it at $15. So I don't know how many of you run bars, but most bars usually average around the 20 to 25% cost frame for cost of goods sold. So if you have a drink that's selling a lot, it's 11%, you're going to help your pocket, but you're also going to help your numbers. So
yeah. Oh, sorry. You can. I just like that picture of you.
Yeah.
So I love this. So I included these drinks because I love this story. I think Leo, to me, I met Leo when I first moved to New York. He was my bartender. I loved Madison Park, and he was so charming. And it was so incredible to see you
she
now.
had 2 drinks.
I've had 2 drinks. No, to see you now and to see how you've grown. And so I thought this was interesting to talk about the development of you experimenting. And then so you gave me these 3 cocktails to kind of show me your progression.
Yeah, so like in 2005, like I said, I inherited a lot of these things, so I was just trying to use them in anything. And again, I had no clue what I was doing, so I bought books, and there was only like 3 of them back then. And I basically made every classic that I could, and I was like, as everyone does, and you're like, oh, these are cool, but like, how do we innovate? So I remember, I think it was 2008, Banal was a product that first came to America then. Eric Seed, if you're around, thank you. But it was something that I had never really encountered. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I make this an interesting cocktail? So as you see, I did something super simple. I basically did a variation on a Cresta. And then just sort of added other flavoring elements with the cacao. But super easy cocktail, really, really, really cheap to make. Banal, I think, is around the $16 range. So this cocktail probably cost me like about $1 to put on the menu, and you sell it for $15, you make quite a bit of money. But it's also very interesting because we all love Crestas, but drinking a traditional Cresta is great, but how about you elevate somebody's experience and you give them something that is more interesting and more flavorful than just a traditional Cresta. The next one is something a little bit more complicated. This was about 2009. This has been a modified recipe. We added Avua recently, but it was just all Aperol and Campari and Barolo Canato back then. But it's just a take on an Aperol sour. So Aperol, lemon, egg white, sugar, really delicious cocktail. This is, why don't we combine a whole bunch of other products and make it even more interesting? So the Umbrana actually gives it a bit more texture and body. It also gives it a nice cinnamon note. Aperol being Aperol, it's delicious. It adds that bitterness. It also adds that sort of rhubarb orange note. Barolo Canato, another sort of aperitivo made from Barolo that's been fortified and spiced. And then just a little Campari to give it a touch more bitterness. But you can make this cocktail with removing most of those ingredients and just using one. So if you want to do Aperol or just Barolo Canato, it also works. And then this is the last cocktail. This is more 2000, what year are we in? 2017, 2016. And this is sort of just a take on another low ABV cocktail, take on a sherry cobbler, but instead of doing something that's integrated with a lot of fruit, I wanted to do something more vegetal for the spring. As you see, it does have salt, so salt is not a bad thing. But it's just really easy. It's taking 2 of my favorite cocktails, one being a sherry cobbler and one of them being a chartreuse swizzle, and combining them and making something. A chartreuse swizzle is super expensive to make, by the way. If you order it at your friend's bar, they'll probably charge you a reasonable price, but it definitely kills everyone's cost. But it's really easy cocktail, super interesting, easy to make, and you could crush tons of these. Also, chartreuse gets you really drunk really quick because it's a lot higher in ABV. This is a lot lower.
So when I met Leo, he was talking about his pour cost and his margins, and I had no idea what he was talking about, but he would say it, and people I was with would be like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, and then I got a text like literally in the middle of the night one day where someone was like, how the fuck does Leo get his margins? Like, that's insane. Like, so that was one of the third thing I knew about you was that you're really good at pricing and you're really savvy and so I really wanted you to talk about why these low ABV drinks are so we're going to move into some numbers. And Leo's going to take you
Have
on
some
that
more
journey.
drinks because this may not be that interesting or maybe really interesting. I don't know.
I think it's fascinating.
Sorry, Leo. Is any questions so far for Leo?
There was the last ingredient on the set, on the previous one, or
Which one?
the avoir.
It's a cachaça that's been aged in a very specific type of wood, Amburana wood, that's indigenous to Brazil, and that wood itself gives it a lot of spice character. So you have a lot of cinnamon, a lot of clove, a lot of nutmeg in there. So it's a really interesting product. I use it a lot as a modifier. I mean, you could use it as a base ingredient, obviously, but as a modifier, it really adds like a cinnamon note without adding sugar or other qualities, and it adds a lot of texture, and it's really good.
Another question there?
Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna say, these slides are available to you guys. If you want them after, you can get the recipes from us. Sorry, good question?
As consumers become more involved, you run into the situation again where you serve someone an aperitivo and they're like half offended, they're like, I'm not that drunk, man, like, I'm okay.
No, never. I mean, I would never, if a dude's ordering martinis and he's fine, I would be like, hey, let's switch to an aperitivo. This is a different discussion, but there's a lot of cocktails that are actually very classic cocktails that are the inverse of martinis, or instead of being like that 2-to-1 ratio where it's 2 parts gin and 1 part vermouth, it's the opposite. So there's like a really famous cocktail called a Montauk. Well, not that famous, I guess. But it's basically, mostly sweet vermouth with orange bitters and then a little bit of gin. And that's a nice variation on Negroni. It's usually like a 2-to-1 with some orange bitters, and it doesn't have any Campari, but it's slightly more bitter because of the vermouth. And a lot of people that are drinking martinis that want to try something different, that's an easy sell. You're like, hey, it's another gin cocktail. Like, it seems like, a strong drink. I don't want to be misogynist, but like a manly drink or like a really strong female drink. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But it's an easy way to switch somebody over, and we do that all the time when, this dude has been having or this girl has been having 4 martinis. You're like, all right, well, you're in New York, so you're probably not driving, but you're going to start harassing people soon, so let's give you something different.
We have 10 minutes, so I want to make sure Leo gets to these slides, so we're going to hold questions till the end. Sorry.
Yeah. So tequila, also another thing that's really in trend, so why not combine 2 things, tequila and low ABV, and make a drink. So this is a traditional Tommy's Margarita. For those of you that are worried about money, Tommy's Margaritas, not only are they extremely delicious, but they're also a lot cheaper because you don't use Cointreau, which is a great product, but also really expensive. So this is just telling you, a Margarita is one of the most expensive drinks you can make at your bar. And if you don't know this, you should know. You should not be pushing people towards a Margarita because it's expensive as fuck. And if you care about your cost, well, you don't want to do it. So if you see total cost is $3.41, this is just an average on what a bottle of tequila costs nowadays. Lime juice, depending on where you are, it's usually about 40 cents an ounce. And agave syrup is a little bit cheaper. So this drink would be a lot more expensive if you actually did the 3/4 Cointreau. It actually comes up over $4. It's one of the more expensive drinks that you can make. But if you sell this at $15, it's a 23% cost. That means that the booze costs 23% of that cocktail, so you only have 77% in profit. But as you know, if you run a bar or restaurant, that's not profit. It goes to paying wages and rent and glassware and all that stuff. So right now, split bases are really in fad as well. It makes the cocktail not only more interesting because you're adding another component, but it's also super easy to sell to somebody because you're like, dude, you love margaritas? I have something for you. It's going to blow your mind. It's a margarita, but it's even more elevated because it's, has sherry. As we know, Talia's other book is all about sherry. It's an amazing book. You can get it at Amazon.com. But sherry being another product that's super on trend, but also super, super cheap and super delicious. So now you're serving somebody something that's lower ABV. They're not getting as drunk because margaritas are super boozy. But also, if you look, $3.41 versus $2.28. At $15, it's a 15% pour cost versus a 23%. Good for the pocket. If you notice, it's a little bit different versus 1 ounce of lime juice and ½ ounce of agave. We're doing 3/4 ounces of lime juice. So why do we do that? Again, in that Mr. Potato Head that Mr. Joaquin Simo taught us, sherry has a lot of a lot of flavoring components, so it has acidity, it has a lot of racing acidity. So you're going to want to lower that lime juice to balance out that cocktail. So if you think about it, 23% versus 15%, it doesn't sound all that much. If you're a place that's sort of busy and this is one of your biggest cocktails that you sell, revenue cocktail $11.55 versus $12.75. Again, doesn't seem like that crazy. But if you look at it, in 1 month, if this is one of your best-selling cocktails, you're probably going to sell about $900. That's about $1,000 that you're making extra revenue. In over a year, that's about $13,000 to your pocket. So bar owner, bar manager, bar whatever, like you want to make money. If you don't really care, it's fine, but your bar will probably stay open longer if you have better costs. So if you're even a patron, you're like, hey, I want this bar to be around a bit more. I'm getting a better cocktail. I don't care about paying the same price. There you go. So here's another drink, a caipirinha. So caipirinha being a very classic cocktail from Brazil, just another take on a regular sour. So caipirinhas are usually pretty affordable because cachaça is not super expensive. So $2.49 at $15 a cocktail, 70% cost. Well, has anyone here ever had an Aperol caipirinha? It is like one of the most delicious cocktails in the world. You should definitely try it out. Jane Danger is the first one that ever made one for me. And look, $1.64 to make. Like, that's super cheap compared to $2.49, about half the price. So there you go, 17% cost versus 11. Again, there you go is your revenue, and then you're making an additional $9,000 a year from this cocktail. Those are only 2 cocktails on the list. Both of those cocktails are going to be crowd pleasers. People are going to love them. They're going to think you're a genius because you came up with something so interesting that they've never tasted, but that's also super accessible because they've had a caipirinha or they've had a margarita, and now they're having something that is equally as good, if not better, and you're making more money. Wait. So basically talking about the bottom line, yearly alcohol sales, if you did this with most of your cocktails, you would make an additional $500,000 or $400,000 a year by doing this if it's one of your cocktails. So for a bar, especially small bars, it's quite a bit of money. Most bars don't even make that in general at the end of the year if you're a small bar. So having that help definitely allows your bars to be around a lot longer, allows your guests to patronize the bar a lot more because you're not closed, and gives a better experience for the guests in general. It also allows your bartenders to feel like they're rock stars because, hey, why not? We get to be creative. We get to try new things. We're not serving just a traditional margarita or just a traditional caipirinha. And a lot of these split bases or full bases work with a lot of products. So I urge you to go back home and try these out with all of your favorite Amaros, Aperitivos, or whatever you want to call them, Amargos. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
Sorry for being so boring, but.
Hold on. Okay, all good. We still have another 4 minutes.
We're good. That was like championship level. No, you're great. So now we want to talk about what's next for Spritz. Maybe if you can just each. We had a quick question. Yeah, sorry.
What were the sales based on? Because I don't know most people's restaurants that do $7 million.
What were these sales based on? It was based on if it's your best-selling cocktail, like 900 cocktails in the month, which if you're a semi-busy bar, that's not that crazy. Those numbers were based off of one of the bars at NOMAD, to be honest. So that's, Anne-Marie joked and said that, like, hey, how do you get your pour cost so low? I totally did that by mistake. We opened the NOMAD 6 years ago, and I created a list that was open for the spring and summer because that's when we were opening. And my cost, because we sold a shit ton of cocktails, which is completely different than 11 Madison Park, where cocktails are about 4% of our revenue, or sales mix. At NOMAD, it's about 50%. So when we opened, I had a 17% cost, and all of our investors were like, wait, what is this? You were budgeted for 25%, 17%, good, you're never going back. And I was like, fuck, because what happens in the wintertime, as we all know, you use a lot of darker spirits, a lot of spirits that might be a little bit more expensive, a lot of more booze-heavy spirits. So I was like, fuck, how do I do this? And part of the way that I did that is, I added a Spritz menu to our lunch menu, which we no longer have. But lunch we were struggling a bit, and we're like, how do we bring up check revenue or check averages? And it's one of those things that I know everyone thinks about New York and the 2-martini lunch. Not a thing anymore. Expense accounts are not a thing anymore. People don't really drink that much anymore. I don't know, it's frowned upon for some reason to go back to work a little drunk. But when people see like, oh, whoa, this cocktail's cheaper, it's low ABV, it's a Spritz, it's on the menu, fuck it, I'll have one. And we saw that our sales for cocktails during lunch went actually up by 35%, which ended up being about like $12,000 in that month. And just revenue that we never would have gotten. I don't even know if I answered your question. I don't remember what the question was.
Yeah. So it's based on a busy New York bar, but it would still scale for your smaller, maybe not New York City bar. Yeah.
We have one more question.
Have you run any numbers on making your own stuff and how, like if you're paying like $30 for a bag of like Gentian or Chacona?
Yeah. I actually have run numbers on all of that, and making your own bitters, while it sounds great, it's usually not as good, but it's way more expensive. Way more expensive than buying bitters. If you buy bitters correctly, if you buy bitters through one of the big companies that sort of sells them at a discounted rate and not at like your neighborhood liquor store that's charging you $25 for a bottle of Angostura. But yeah, it's a lot of those herbs are sort of specialty products or a lot of those roots. So getting them, you usually have to order them online. You pay for shipping, you pay taxes on them, and then it ends up being a lot more expensive. Plus, that doesn't even take into account how many things you actually throw away because none of us are mastered, well, some of you may be master distillers or master blenders, but I'm definitely not. So I would say out of all the bitter, 1 minute, sorry. Out of everything that I've tried, I've basically failed 99% of the time, so it's going in the garbage. Wait.
So we have 1 minute. So is there any other question left in the room? Ben?
Yeah, just out of interest, the room, Leo, a lot of interesting ingredients. How many renditions of one cocktail would you make before you were happy?
I mean, there's no real answer to that. Sometimes you make a cocktail and you're like, dude, I'm amazing. I made this cocktail, it's delicious. And then you try usually about 5 or 6 other iterations and they might not be as good. Sometimes it takes a year to make a cocktail. Every time you're like, I want this fucking cocktail to work. I want it to taste like, I don't know, vanilla ice cream and coconut. Like, I don't know. And it never comes out, and it might take a long time for you to do that. But what we always do is when we do recipe testing, which we do every week, we create the cocktail, we taste it after it's made, then after 30 seconds, then after a minute, then after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, to see how it sits. And then the next time we start, the next week, we will taste all the cocktails that we liked again in the very beginning with a fresh palate to make sure that it's not one of these 2-drink drinks. Because we've created a lot of amazing cocktails at EMP and a NOMAD, but it's only after recipe testing, so you realize the only people that will like them is after people that have had 2 drinks. So you might like them right now, and then you taste them next time, you're like, this is fucking awful. What was I thinking? But yeah.
It's, I think we're done with the timing, I guess. I would love to say thank you to our panelists here. We wish you like a lovely spritz year ahead, so hopefully you're gonna see everybody at Tales Over the Cocktail. There you get all our contact details if you wanna take a picture, tweet, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you like it. And once again, salute. Thank you so much for the time.
Sorry, Giuseppe, the last question. What's for lunch?
What's for lunch? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Right on time.
Perfect. Italian, with precise.